Hi, everyone. Deborah Hamilton. Boy, has it been a busy week. I can tell you it has been a busy week for everyone, but I'm so glad that Jan's here and Rose is here, and I'm going to start on time. I'm Deborah Hamilton. You have come to the MAP Community Call for Wednesday, June 29th, and we're so glad you're here. You know, it's been a really long time since we had a conversation about the D's. So when we are talking about navigating the journey your pet takes when you can't care for it, it's important to understand what that means. And the MAP plan really addresses the different situations that might arise in your life or in the life of your pet that will really require you to make that plan applicable and exercisable, so to speak, by others in the event you cannot get there. So there are absolutely 8 Ds that come into play when there are emergencies in your life. So everyone knows about the first one. If you die, your pets really are left without any sort of direction unless you've made a plan. That's why the MAP plan exists. That's why we're here every Wednesday, because I want to make sure everyone has a plan in place in the event they pass away. Now, remember, if you pass away and all your information is in your will and not outside your will, it may take a really long time in probate for that information to get to the people who need to get it. So that's why coming here every Wednesday night, listening to what we talk about with respect to our pets and how we put things together is so important. So make sure that if you do have the ability to join us at one of our upcoming workshops, you put together the MAP plan that will help the people who are going to be left behind take care of your beloved animals. So there are 8 Ds. I said the first one is death. That's easy. But did you think that disability, dementia, disease, deployment, divorce, losing documents, are all things that could make it difficult for you to care for your pets? In most of my cases, when we have relationship breakups, it's the disagreement between documents that get in the way. If you sit down and make a MAP plan and decide what will happen to the pets before you have a breakup, that makes having documents available to show that you're right and they're wrong unimportant because you've already addressed it. I have to tell you that delay is something that no one pays attention to. I will give you a scenario that happened to us last night. My husband's flight was canceled. I know all of us have heard that flights are canceled all the time now, and he had to fly to Raleigh. So I live very far from Raleigh, 3 hours. So a round trip drive from my home in Eastern Carolina in Morehead City to Raleigh is 3 hours. So the dogs and I gave them dinner. 5:30, we got in the car. We got to Raleigh about 9:30, and he was, well, about 9 o'clock. And he arrived around 9:30, and we headed home around 10, and we got home around 1:30. That delay put my pets in a situation where either I would have to find someone to come and care for them or take them with me. As it turns out, in my car, easy to take with me. So I did. And I took them out at a friend's house, let them run around, who lived in Raleigh. And it really made a big difference. Welcome, everyone. It's Deborah Hamilton, and I'm so glad all of you are here. I started talking about what we're going to talk about tonight already. It's been such a crazy week for everyone. It's sort of, you know, mind bending what we're all going through right now and how we're dealing with things. But of course, our pets help us get through those things. So I'm so glad you're here for the MAP community program. We're going to talk tonight about the D's, which is one of the things that I haven't touched upon in a long time. And so I'm going to start a little bit from the beginning. There are 8 D's that we count as being very important to prepare for in the event you have pets. So you have to think about death, of course. And if you put all your plans in your will, remember that it takes a long time for your will to come to fruition. So you really have to make plans that stay outside your will as well as inside your will, so that people can act on the benefit and on the behalf of your pets if, God forbid, you pass away. But what are the other D's that I talk about? Well, I talk about a lot of them, and some of them are really things that you might not think of as being very important. So delay, if you're delayed getting home, if you're delayed or helping someone who's delayed, how do you take care of your pets? Can you have someone come in, or can you have someone stay? If you have the dog in the kennel, can they stay? Now, with all the cancellations in the airlines, delays are rampant. It's not even, something that might happen. It's something that does happen. I had a flight to Austin on Thursday that was canceled, and I had to fly home. My husband had a flight home from Nashville that was canceled, and he had to fly to Raleigh, which took 3 hours for me to get to and get home. So these are things you really need to plan for, and that's outside of what you would really think to plan for your pets. So there's dementia, of course. We all know or have had friends or family who have suffered with Alzheimer's or dementia, and you really need to plan for what would happen to your pets if something happened to you in that vein, and whether or not you'd want to keep those pets with you or place those pets somewhere else. You might contract a disease that makes you weakened. I mean, COVID was one of the biggest diseases we were at risk of contracting, but there's also cancer. There's also tick-borne diseases that we might actually get from our pets. So these are things that you have to plan for. If something happens and you become debilitated, these are one of the D's you have to plan for when you make your plan for your pet. There's deployment, because people go away who serve our country. How do you plan for the care of your pet while you're away, and then to get them back? Or if, God forbid, something happens to you that you can't get them back, what will happen to them? There's always divorce. Nobody ever plans for divorce or relationship breakups. But if you have the paperwork in place to understand what will happen to the pet if the relationship breaks up, that is one of the biggest things that will make life easier for you and your pet. I have to say, one of the D's is documents, and I put that in there because, quite frankly, if you would document how the care of the pet is going to occur, it would be a less adversarial transition than if you wait and try to prove that this is your dog, or, well, I know they bought it, but I took care of it. It really is important to make sure that you write down how that pet will be cared for if something happens to you. Of course, there's disability. So if you break a leg, break an arm, I mean, anyone who's been here a few times knows that the reason the MAAP plan was created was because I broke my ankle in 2013. And I had 9 dogs who got fed in the basement. And my husband was very wonderful taking care of me, but he said that's what he was going to do, take care of me and the 9 dogs I'm going to have to figure out. And I decided that I probably wasn't the first person on earth who broke a limb, an arm, a leg, whatever, and couldn't get to their dogs or feed their dogs or do whatever, or their cats or their birds or their horses. So I thought, this is a plan I have to help people make so that they can make sure that their pets are cared for long-term, short-term. So as we do every evening when we get together, I check in with everyone who is here to see where they're from and what kind of pets they have, and ask them any questions they might have that I can answer before we go through, as I want to do tonight, why the D's are so important. So let me check in with you, Jan. How's everything going? How's Tonka?
Tonka's fine. He's heard me mention his name and he's coming running over. No, but he's well.
Oh,
and,
good.
Yeah. And I think I take for granted how well behaved he is, because people comment all the time, and I just think it's normal, and then people will say, wow, he's so good. But yeah, things are good with us.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Wonderful. And Kieran, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine. Absolutely fine. Absolutely. And of course, you know yourself, FINE is an acronym.
It is.
For?
Go ahead.
You're going to love this. Frustrated, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted.
That's sort of describes my entire day today. So I am so glad you defined that, because I have to say that today was a tough day because of the 6-hour round trip I took late last night. So, there are things that happen that make us not as upright. So yeah, frustrated, neurotic, exhausted, and
Insecure.
insecure. Well, I might not be insecure, but I'm going to write it down because
Oh.
I'm
But
not insecure. I'm sort of too tired to be insecure. I really don't give a flame. So insecure probably isn't it, but definitely frustrated and neurotic and exhausted. But tonight, I have to say, we have two of our members who are not going to be here. So Susan is having computer trouble. Not that any of us have ever had computer trouble and couldn't get somewhere. God help us. So I'm really glad that I haven't had that in a while. Although last week, as everyone will remember, I was starting every MAP scheduled on my calendar except that day's MAP. So poor Rose had to go back and redo everything because I can sometimes not pay attention to the date. And Sally is winging her way to Sweden. And I have to say, it's one of the D's because she was so desperate. And she shared that with the community last week, I think, that she had a caregiver who was lined up to take care of the dogs for her vacation, who called her the week before the vacation was to start and say, sorry, can't take care of the dogs. Now, I have two dogs here. One is 2.5 and the other is 5. It's not good for a 2.5-year-old or a 5-year-old to be left alone with someone you don't know really well, because the chances of them, dying would be really minimal. However, when you have a 12 and a 13-year-old, it is heart-wrenching that you've worked with someone for a while and then they call up and say, sorry, something's come up, I can't take care of the dog. Which is why when we talk about the MAP plan, addressing the needs of your pet and appointing caregivers, so it's make a plan, appoint caregivers, address the needs of your pet, and publish it, we always have 3 or 4 people lined up. Well, Sally had 3 or 4 people lined up because she's one of my longtime students, and all 3 of them couldn't handle taking care of the dog. So she had to actually find someone who at the time was a complete stranger. I think it was 10 days ago. And she was a little upset about that. But it turns out that the angels provided, and this person is phenomenal. And then because we all were addressing it at the same time, all the people who were on her list who don't necessarily live nearby, but would be the people who would come if, God forbid, something happened and they needed long-term care, recognized that there were a few people that were around that we hadn't really considered. And this is one of the things that we talk about often here on the MAP plan. You don't really recognize who those people are who are right there in front of you, and you've never asked them. So number one was my son, who lives in Brooklyn, could rent a car and go up and take care of the dogs for at least a day or two until I got there. So we had never really even considered that because my son always lived in California. And I really didn't put 2 and 2 together until Sally was really desperate. And I said, oh my God, Drew is right there. He can do it. And I said to him, would you mind? He goes, absolutely not, Mom. I'd be up in a minute. I said, great, wonderful. And the other piece was that she needed medication, and she has a doctor who lives next door. She needed medication for Athena's ear, and a doctor lives next door. So if you've been here for a little while, Karen, you've heard this so many times, you want to probably kill yourself. And Jen, maybe you've gotten to that point, but you need that nosy neighbor. And she said, the doctor next door is the nosy neighbor. Will he take care of my dogs? Not really. Would he be the person who would come with the piece of paper saying, I know who to call? God forbid, an ambulance was there or somebody needed something. He would be the person who would tell everyone, do not take the dogs out of the house. Remember, that's our biggest thing. You don't want to take the dogs, cats, birds, or horses out of the house. So the nosy neighbor was this guy who she had stopped her mail because she's going to Sweden for 2 weeks. And she said, I could have him get it. And sure enough, before they took off last night, he had already gotten the medication and given it to the caregiver. He was Johnny on the spot. He left his telephone number with the caregiver in case she needed anything. So this is someone who lives next door, who they talk to, they say hello to. They never thought that, he would be instrumental in giving them peace of mind for the care of their pet. Yet here he was. He got the medication to his mailbox because his mail was still coming. He got it over to the caregiver and everything is fine. So remember, those people you least expect are the people that you really need to reach out for. During COVID, I've said this a few times, if you've listened to a few of these programs, I walked around and said, God, I don't know anybody in this neighborhood because I had just moved there in a rental and I had 2 dogs with me. And I said, God, if you get COVID, what do you do? So when I walked, I sort of earmarked all the houses that had pets. And I put my name and address and telephone number in their mailboxes. And it said, in case of an emergency, if you need me to help you care for your pet, this is my number. Let me know, and I'll be happy to take care of your pet in your house. Just call me. And I'd say most of the people I dropped off the cards for came to my house, thanked me so much, and then said, which is what I was looking for, I'll do the same for you. So we exchanged numbers, we exchanged where we lived, where everybody was, because unless you ask, nobody knows that you need help. And talking about a nosy neighbor, I had a neighbor next door who doesn't have pets, but he always said hello to my dog when I walked out and was walking him. And he found out that I didn't put a 3x5 card in his mailbox. He goes, why didn't you? I said, well, you don't have any dogs. He goes, I would take care of your dogs in a minute. I would be right there to take care of your dogs. And I said, well, thank you. I will put you on the list. And so I handed him a sheet of paper that said, in case of an emergency, these are the people you call. And he was one of the best people there to talk to people about how to care for my pet if, God forbid, something happened to me. Let me check in with Connie. How are you, Connie?
Hi there. Sorry, I am late. We are about to put our national specialty information on our website, and we're doing, oh my God, last minute pricing changes. And because I'm the treasurer, guess what? So
yeah, no,
at any rate,
crazy. It's crazy. I said it was a really crazy week. How's everything going? How are the 2 Wheatons?
They're doing fine, but we had a massive California heat wave that actually kept Casey and me out of the show ring this weekend. We were supposed to show Saturday and Sunday in the San Gabriel Valley, and the temperatures were, upwards of 100 degrees, and we had a 1 o'clock ring time for Best of Breed. So, and I had a slightly chopped up arm from a fight with an agave succulent that I lost and the agave won, and I wound up sprouting blood all over the place on my show arm. Oh, God. So, yeah. So at any rate, so Mom was home bandaged up. I'm much better now, but kind of scarred up, and we stayed in the air conditioning. But the fire danger is through the roof. So, yet again,
ready to go.
Watching the skies and listening for fire choppers overhead and all the rest of it, and ready to go. Yeah.
So I'm so glad you're here. I was just finishing up talking about poor Sally and how her caregiver disappeared a week before she was supposed to leave for 2 weeks in Sweden. However, she found a new one that seems to be wonderful. And then I realized my son could be my backup an hour away. So it really worked out well. And her neighbor was her nosy neighbor who was the person who gave them the medication that was necessary for Athena, that of course you forget when everything's falling apart. But we were going to continue to talk tonight about the Ds, because I haven't hit that in a long time. And if anybody's been listening, the Ds are the most important. And I talk about that because last night Jim was delayed coming home. And what was I going to do with the dogs? I couldn't really leave them here for 6 hours, which is the time it takes to drive from my house to Raleigh to pick him up and Raleigh back. So I called a friend who lives in Raleigh and I said, by the way, can I drive by, drop the dogs off to run around and then go home? And she said, absolutely. So Jim took an Uber from Raleigh Airport and met me at my friend's house right outside of Raleigh. And the dogs got to run around and we got to visit a little with my friend and then we drove back. But it was such a shift in your day. And so, delays really, nobody really pays attention to what delays do to your day. However, with the cancellations of flights now, you really do have to take that extra step. I was going to go to Austin. I know that Jan and Kieran heard this already. And so did the people listening from the beginning, but I was going to Austin on Thursday. That didn't happen. They had an outbreak of COVID in the tower at Austin. So they shut it from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock. And my flight was at 3 o'clock. So they just decided to cancel my flight. So the conference that I was going to speak at in person, I now was speaking at remotely, which if any of you have ever done any public speaking on Zoom is fabulous like this. But when you give a presentation, it is you and your PowerPoint. So you are looking at your PowerPoint. I don't know how many people were there. I have no idea if they were paying attention. It was a ballroom. There could have been 3 people there. There could have been 300 people there. I have no idea. And of course, it's hard to have question and answer. And I had built the PowerPoint to be an in-person PowerPoint. So there were a lot of slides that says, so what are you doing? Give me a little input. And I was going to, call on people. And that didn't happen. So remember, delays seem to be ridiculous. Why would I have to prepare for delays? But you really do, because if you have a dog in a kennel or if you have someone taking care of your dog and you're delayed coming home, you need to have a backup plan. You need to ask them, listen, with everything going on the way it is, what are you going to do going forward if I can't get home? Are you able to stay? And if you're not able to stay, who's the backup 1, 2, 3? So the D's, of course, are delay, disaster, dementia, disease, deployment, divorce, disability, and death. And of course, I also said documents, because for me, having the documents for your pet is really important in relationships and how to make sure that everybody has documented how the pet will be cared for. I can tell you my office is full of people who are really arguing about their pets and not necessarily paying attention to what's in the best interest of the pets, or giving up and not letting contractual agreements be enforced because they just don't care. So you really need to have these conversations early. So I'd love to check in with Kieran and Jan and Connie about which one of the Ds do you feel is the most important to prepare for when you're making your MAAP plan. Kieran, I'm going to start with you. I know you don't have any pets, but you're here because you've written the wonderful book, When Your Child Asks for a Pet, Let One-Eyed Leo Lead the Conversation. And of course, that has to do with a pet who teaches children the responsibility of pet ownership, as well as their parents the responsibility of pet ownership. So which of the Ds do you think is the most important?
Good question. I suppose just the events of the last few months coming out of COVID, people, as you mentioned, the airports, there's a big one, and Ireland is a perfect point in case where everybody believed it would take about 5 years for the airline industry to recover. So a lot of people were pensioned off, or there were agreements made, and then suddenly planes back in the sky, but you can't take people off the street and bring them into high security jobs.
Right.
So abracadabra. So and then what's happening at the moment is the COVID in Ireland is again at a very high peak, probably one of the worst moments. So I suppose delay is going to take, in other words, our typical routines have been hit very badly and will probably continue. So that basically means no matter what redundancy you build in, it's going to be delay, and unexpected.
Right.
So that might be at the top of the tree.
After I had to deal with Jim's pickup and then my not getting to Austin, and then I thought, well, what would have happened if I was in Austin and couldn't get home? So that's why I thought tonight I would really hit on that, because it's so important for us to think about those things, even though they may never happen. Jan, how about you? Which one of the D's is the most critical for you?
I think that because in November thankfully I wasn't hurt, but I was in a pretty major car accident the day before Thanksgiving.
Oh God.
5 cars in the accident, 3 fire engines, 2 ambulances, kind of thing. And thankfully I was fine and Tonka was with me, but, had I not been okay, made me, or in the just taken to the hospital and he was separated from me, having that list in my car, really would make a huge difference to know, because from where we were, I probably have about 5 or 6 people who could then, arrange somehow to get him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. So, I think that's the, I think it's all what's forefront to us from our experience. And for me, since I had that experience, that's what's kind of in my brain now.
Yeah, it's such a small thing to put a note in your car that says, in case of emergency, call these people, because none of our dogs want to go to the shelter and sit there with nobody coming in. God forbid you're in a car accident, and okay, if you're awake and you can tell people what to do, but if you're not, if you're knocked unconscious, then they're just going to do things. And I know for me, my dogs, are very responsive to emergency situations, and they'll go follow somebody wherever, and who's taking them, who knows. So having those notes on their crate, or having that note on your dashboard somewhere easily seen in case of an emergency, either my dogs are home, so call these people, or my dog, you can see, is in the car and call these people. So it really is something that you don't think of until we have these conversations, and you go, oh, like Jan just said, that really made sense to me, because here I was in an accident, I wasn't hurt, but boy, do I want to put that sign in my car. So I'm so glad that you shared that. So we have delay, and then we have disaster, preparing for disaster, and pre-planning for the care of the pet. How about you, Connie?
Well, just based on where I live, it's got to be disaster. And that goes for Jan, speaking to your auto accident, the Los Angeles freeway system. Every time you get on the freeway, there is always the risk that somebody's going to run into you, or, God knows what's going to happen. Or even if you are not directly hit, you can be delayed by an 18-wheeler tractor trailer truck going over on its side on a major freeway, and you are stuck there for hours. And sometimes it's been 6 hours, depending upon the time of day and the amount of traffic on the freeways. So, and then of course the persistent fire danger, which is getting worse by the minute. So that is always top of mind here for all of us.
Yeah, disaster. Absolutely. It's interesting you brought that up, because as you were speaking, I was sitting there thinking about my drive home from Raleigh last night, and nothing was opened. And we went through long 10, 20 mile periods or sections where there was nothing. There was no gas station. There was no fast food restaurant. There was nothing. And I'm sitting here thinking, boy, I'm so used to being a New Yorker, and, something's always open 24/7. But here in Eastern Carolina, nothing is open 24/7. And so I sat there and I went, wow, that is something I'm really going to pay attention to as I was driving home, and not being, I had a full tank of gas, thank God, because I decided to stop. But had I not, there was really nowhere to go. So you really have to prepare for the kind of things that might occur. So being prepared doesn't start with a D, but when you're going somewhere, really look. When I drove cross country, we really did prepare. And we had that talk a few weeks ago when I hit the pothole and blew out my tire. And I took the pictures of Junie in his crate safely on the side of the road while they were taking the spare tire out of the bottom of my back, because my lift back, which was where the crate sits. And if you have a dog and your tires don't drop from the bottom like the old days, from under your bumper, and you just wheel them out, if they don't do that, if you have to take all that crap out of the back of your car so that they can get to your tire to put it on, it gives you a huge peace of mind that your dog isn't on a freeway, or isn't on a dark road where people might not be able. I have red dogs. At least the little Wheatons are a lighter color, so at night you might see them. And I don't know what color Tonka is, but I think he's a lighter color. Is he a golden? No, he's dark.
He's black.
He's black. So he and my Irish would be really lost in being able to be seen because they're darker dogs. So we really need to make sure that we provide them with some safe haven in which to be if our car breaks down. And of course, that means putting water in your car, extra water in your car, putting some of, we as dog show people have reflective blankets that we put on our crates to reflect the sun out. We also have screens that we put with the doors open so that the sun is blocked, so that although it's hot out, we're shading it as much as we can to try to bring the temperature in the car down. These are things that you might want to think about putting in your car if you're taking a long trip with your pets. If you're taking a short trip with your pets, then you can call your colleagues to come and get you if something breaks down. But if you're doing what I did last night, which is a 3-hour trip, making sure you have all those things, which I did, in the car, so that if you did have an issue, you had water for you had water for the dogs. If it was the middle of the day in Southern California or in Morehead City, North Carolina, where we're getting up to the 90s, you have something to block the sun to keep the dog and yourself really safe. So I hope this helps everyone tonight, because when we talk about the Ds, the MAAP plan is make a plan. And we make a plan surrounded by understanding that things happen. And those things can be just disasters in our neck of the woods. So if you live in the Midwest, it's a tornado. If you live on the coast, it could be a hurricane. If you live in California, it could be a hurricane, a fire, an earthquake. So many things could happen. And, knowing what to do and having things in place are so important. We are all getting older. And so, our chances of getting a disease or coming down with dementia are things, or God forbid dying, are things we need to plan for. So our pets don't have, you haven't navigated the journey they're supposed to take. So I'm so glad all of you were here. I hope the review of the Ds was really important, because quite frankly, you can't write a MAAP plan. You can't make a plan without understanding that the 8 Ds need to be addressed, so that people know what you want to do with your pets if something's going to happen to you. Divorce, delay, disease, dementia, disaster, disability, and death. Just really things that we don't necessarily want to think about. However, we really need to. So until next week, I'm going to check in with everybody. You, Kieran, first of all, what's up for you this week? Because I know that you don't celebrate the 4th of July, but all of us do.
No, we don't. We don't. I suppose the closest that we have in Ireland is actually the 12th of July, which is the historical battle many years ago. And that's a different story for a different time. But I'll put it this way: there's a quick exodus out of the north for that particular few days or weekend.
Oh, good. How about you, Jan? How do you handle it? Because of course, there's a lot of firecrackers, a lot of fireworks, a lot of noise. I know that poor Mariah here has been losing her mind. She's here with me now. She's Junie's daughter. And we have pneumatic nail guns, which are really putting her over the edge. So how are you? I don't know if Tonka is affected by fireworks.
Tonka can't stand them.
Yeah.
And it's not too crazy about thunder either. A little bit better now with thunder, but I will be very close to home. I learned that I usually don't go out it's just not worth it to me. First of all, I'm not going to leave him because he's going to be too upset. And second of all, I'm not going to take him out because I'm scared that all he needs to do is run off because he hears one and either I can't, I'm not prepared, or for some reason, I was with somebody once who had a dog they were in, like opened up the back of their truck, like their truck or their SUV, and firecracker went off and the dog bolted, and so I think I'm just like, it's okay, I'll just stay in the house.
That is such a good point to make, because most of our dogs listen to us all the time until fireworks happen or a car backfires or some horrible noise. I know that Mariah definitely is very well trained, much better trained than Junie, I must say. However, when the pneumatic nail guns are going, we say in the vernacular here in the Hamilton house, she doesn't know whether to shit or wind or watch, because she has all these noises with the pneumatic generator that builds up the pressure to shoot the pneumatic gun, and that's running. And then the pneumatic gun is shooting the nails. It's terrible. It's sort of like having a rat-a-tat-tat of fireworks all day long. So she's been handling it pretty well, but we're glad they went home. How about you, Connie? You probably stay home with the little terrorists too.
Oh, absolutely. They're not nearly as bad as Grammy Bammy was. She was absolutely terrified of fireworks. These two are pretty resilient, but because we live literally up the hill from the Port of Los Angeles, which has huge fireworks going off for major public displays in the evening. It's pretty noisy here, and of course the sound travels up the peninsula, up the hill. Yep. So and then, even though fireworks are highly illegal in the county of Los Angeles, all my neighbors think that this is apocalypse now with everything going off. And or the beaches at Normandy, and it really sounds like a war zone. But hopefully, because of the drought, the fire department has absolutely been getting on everybody's case. Do not ignite fireworks, because everything is a tinderbox. So I just always close up the house, keep the AC on, and turn up the TV or the stereo or whatever with John Philip Sousa.
That's right. Have the wonderful marching music, however, not to have anything else occur. I'm doing the same thing. I haven't been here for the 4th of July, so I don't know what the cacophony will be, but I'm hopeful that there is none. And I think that both of the dogs, might be okay inside, but we too will turn up the music and turn up the TV and keep them indoors, because really, the one thing you have to remember is when dogs are scared by something such as a loud boom, they take off. So don't think, well, your dog, always comes when he's called. Yes, he does, unless he's scared the bejesus out of him. So make sure that you keep them safe. Even if you don't take them out on a leash, take them out on a leash. And as Jan said, it really, you want to be prepared. And even if they're on a leash, sometimes they can rip that leash out of your hand if they're frightened enough. So just make sure you keep your dog safe, keep the gates locked. I put clips on the gates as well to make sure that it's a two-step opening of my gates. So my gates are closed. But until next week, we are already, I can't believe, over the half hour. I'm so glad all of you are here. Have a very happy and safe 4th of July. It's Deborah Hamilton of Hamilton ADR, North Carolina, and of course, this wonderful MAAP community. I hope this call helped everyone to recognize there are many things you have to prepare for. That's why we call them the 8 Ds that you have to think about. Have a great 4th of July. Keep your pets safe. And until next week, kiss your pet for me. Take care.